I was born, but not born today. I was born when I was born. You see, back in the day, birthdays didn't have a day. They just happened. And the doctor would say to you, you were born in 1802. And I always thought that the year 1802 was when I was born. But it turned out that it was actually the time. Say 1802 was the time that I was born. The military time, 1802. So 6:02 p.m. I was born. But I still think it was the year that I was born. Because I was raised by a bunch of foxes down by the quarry. And we would run around doing stuff run down by the quarry. But now I'm in college doing homework. I'm doing homework for college, getting that degree. Not a Celsius. I don't go to school to get a Celsius. I go to school to get a degree. Working on this assignment to make a goal statement on my assignments. A goal statement. You see, on the fifth day of the 10-day markings, the leader of the pack came up to me and said, it's time to be Vills in the greens. And I said, okay, sir, I'll follow you, sir. So he led the way. He led the way, and I followed him. And he took me to a Dollar General. And we met the Dollar General, and he said, I'm what's hired when the government can't afford generals anymore. Cheap generals. Dollar General. What's up, Jody? One time I was walking down the road and I stumbled upon a spoon in the road. And I said, that's rather interesting. Why is there a spoon in the road? So I picked it up to look at the spoon, and it in fact was a spoon. But upon looking closer on it, I realized it was a perfectly clean spoon. So I concluded that no one like was using the spoon when they lost it. It probably fell out of their pocket. So I went to the police and I said, hey, I found this spoon. I want to make sure that this spoon gets to the rightful owner. And the cops looked at me and said, yo, we've been trying to find you because that's your spoon, you crackhead. And that's when I realized, oh, it was mine. So in the year 1995, there was this select team of people that were picked to go check out this building that was long since abandoned. So the team went to the building, and as they approached the building, they realized they were not alone because they were hearing like movements and stuff within the home in the building. So the team leader said, "All right, guys, we gotta go in there and see what's going on in this building. We were selected by the president to come check this building out." So the team enters the building and they're clearing it. And they can hear movement, they can hear sounds, they can hear things. And it was like you stressed, it was a little scary for this team. Well, there was no power in this building. There was nothing. And then, out of nowhere, out of from the air vents in the building, were drones, but they weren't drones, they were dentures because the building was an abandoned nursing home, and all the elderly folk that were left behind by the CNAs turned their dentures into drones and thought it was Ukraine. What's up, Kenny? Welcome back. I'm telling stories that don't make sense as I do my homework. Oh, shit. Hey, no, you're okay. I got a notebook. Okay. So you guys want to know the story on how I found my hair? I found my hair, and it wasn't at the barber shop either. It was not at the barber shop where I found my hair. It was actually um, at Target, like the store. It was at Target. It wasn't in Target either. It was behind it. There was a guy selling hair. Like back in my day, we didn't have them things. We didn't have have them gadgets or them fancy things in our pockets. What we did have was each other. And when we were bored and not doing nothing, we would look at each other and remind each other how much we mean to each other. And there's one time when the whole neighborhood was bored. Oh, it was everyone was so bored. And everybody around town was just curious on what was going on down there because it was just a professional development. But there wasn't much of a choice for anybody because there was a thing going on downtown that everyone was all confused about. But to be real honest, everyone else around town was trying to figure out the same thing. So there really wasn't much for me to do other than just sit there and take it all in and trying to figure out what to do with the situation that was presented to me. So, then it was quite interesting because in one time this thing, it was rather interesting because once you got immersed in the situation, it was rather difficult to even figure out what the hell to even do. So we had to take the king bow and the carburetor and put it inside the king folds. But by the time we did that, there was already another rust hole developing down on the other side of the bone. So it was rather interesting that by the time we figured all that out, it was already kind of a shitty situation. So I had to call my grandfather. I would use the home pigeon and send out the home pigeon to send him a message. And by the time we let the pigeon ride to my uncle, the pigeon forgot why he even went there. So we had to send another pigeon. So we sent another home pigeon to send a message to my uncle. And this pigeon was actually a pretty good pigeon. We rented it from Rensselaer down by the corner store at Dollar General. And we actually sent the bird to my uncle, and it got there in about 2 minutes flat. It was a fast bird, and they advertised it as a fast bird. But it was a rather difficult situation anyway. By the time my uncle got the message from the pigeon, the barn, by the time he got there, the barn was completely rusted over. Completely rusted over. There was a big enough hole in it, all the rain coming in. It was a rather interesting time. My uncle came in to give an assessment. He gave an assessment and all of it. And so the person that was assessing the damage of the barn from the storm, he said that to get it all repaired would cost about 10K. And that was about it. But then the third switcher really was the thing that helped us get through the renovations of the barn because it was down in New Orleans, Louisiana, that the most populous city in Louisiana was really the place where we found all kinds of contractors for the contractors to come down and look at the barn. You see, so we met this contractor with heritage of Choctaw. He had the Choctaw heritage, and he said, "Oh, I have all kinds of experience working with rust holes." So that was pretty nice, and he only charged us 8K. He only charged us $8,000 to come out all the way down to Chickasaw County, and put the rust holes, get it all sealed up with the king bolt. But that was actually the beginning of more troubles, though. There was more troubles. There was more troubles because my family travel structure, collapsed on itself because Paw Paw was taken away by aliens. Not the aliens that Trump hates, but the aliens from outer space. The aliens came down and took my Paw, and Paw was really the thing that held us all together. That Paw. Yeah, him and his wife to him, she was like the mother goddess to him. She held them all together, and then he held her together. But when Papa died, the whole family tribal collapsed, man. It all collapsed, and it was all up to me to try and make sure that the integrity of the family circle was maintained. So the Proto-Indo-European sphere was really where it all began. It was really where it all began down there. And then I ended up having a daughter. And she developed languages. My daughter developed languages. Before my daughter was born, there was no languages. And everyone kind of just like looked at each other and went, blah, blah, blah. But my daughter, she invented words, man. She invented words, man. And I tell people all the time that my daughter invented what language and all that, but no one believes me, man. Everyone says language has been around since the dawn of time. But before my daughter was born, I couldn't even speak, man. When they said I was a father, I just looked at the doctor like, nah, my daughter invented language, dog. So the example of that was she developed the Urdu language. The Urdu language down in Malaysia, down there. That was a pretty good country. The French, the French is pretty important to my family roots. See, my family roots were actually French. We're actually French. And even though I may not even sound that French, because I don't sound French because I actually live down here in America. I'm an American that's French from the Proto-European eras, the CSIs and all that stuff. So it was rather interesting. My father actually was a Roman ghoul. He was a Roman ghoul in the year 1802. He ghouled around. He ran things around as a ghoul. And when the casting call came for the new Fallout show on Amazon, he auditioned for the role as the ghoul, but they didn't like him because he said that he was too fat. So I kept telling him that he's gonna need to lose that weight. He's gonna need to lose that weight for the show. Because if you don't lose the weight for the show, they ain't gonna want him on the show. And he said, "Oh, they're gonna want a fat ghoul. They're gonna want a fat ghoul. They're gonna want a fat ghoul." And I said, "But they ain't gonna want to have a fat ghoul on the show. They're gonna want to have a skinny ghoul." So I said for him to start running, but he said, "You know what? I ain't about that running life. I'm just gonna go in there and just do the audition, being out of shape and fat." So back to my family roots being French. My family roots being French. There were a lot of members in my family that were French. First off, there was Jean Valjean, my dad. He was the first French person in my family. He was just born French. He came out in this hospital down in Georgia, and he was just came out saying bonjour, bonjour, what's up for what's up for. So from that moment on, we were just French. It was rather an odd predicament. Some say that my grandmother was actually fooling around with the Canadian French man, but there was no evidence of that other than my father coming out speaking French like straight out of the womb. It was rather interesting. So after some time spending down in Montreal, it was time for me to go experience life down in the Caribbean. It was a rather interesting time down in the Caribbean. It was kind of hot down there. I wasn't used to that heat. I wasn't used to the cold from being in Montreal. But anyway, the Caribbean was rather nice. I met a lot of the indigenous Caribbean folk down there, and I met a lot of people from St. Vincent. The pit locals down from St. Vincent, they accepted me into their tribe after my tribal structure for my own family collapsed. They accepted me into their tribe, and it was a good time being a part of this tribe down in the Caribbean. I kind of felt like I was like a missionary on like a church mission, but except I wasn't no church man. I was just there. I just showed up, and then next thing you know, I'm married to this princess called Taki, and she was rather cool. She actually taught me how to tie my own shoes. So, I just tell stories that don't make sense as I study. cool. Okay. Okay. I think it's about time that I cut down to my family's legacy. You see, my family's legacy has been highly controversial. In the years following Papa's death, when the family tribal structure completely collapsed on itself, there was a lot of influence from the other side of the family, the non-blood side of the family. And there was a lot of criticisms that we weren't doing what we needed to do. So there was a lot of accusations and exaggerations that my papa actually was not taken away by aliens, and that he actually just died. Like he was just old and he just died. But I don't believe that he just died. I believe my papa's out there still floating around up in space, probably around the moon, maybe Uranus, maybe floating around Uranus. Probably hanging out up there in space with the aliens. Man, his aliens that probably took him probably more cool down here, more cool up there than the people down here. Man, all the stuff going on down here don't make me want to live down here on no more. I want to get on one of those spaceships and fly up to space and like, woo, But nah, I can't afford that shit. But hey, if you join now and join the stream and all that, you can actually join my Patreon. You can help donate money to make me go up in space and make me find my pawpaw. So if you want to help me find my pawpaw, make sure you check out my Patreon and subscribe to Patreon so we can find pawpaw. Getting back on the planet Earth. But to be quite honest, by the time I find pawpaw, he might not even want to be back on Earth anymore. He might not even be pawpaw. He might be in charge of some alien spaceship or something. So I don't even know, man. No pawpaw. I remember one time pawpaw caught me stealing moonshine from his moonshine stash that he didn't want no one knowing about. So the thing is, I followed him one night. He and me and Ma were watching me while my parents went off on a vacation on their own. And Paw every night on that summer out here, Paw going lay sneaking out there at night. And my window is right above my bedroom was right above the window that he would sneak out at night. And one night I saw him sneaking out the window, and I jumped out of that shit and I rolled my ankle. But I was able to commit, and I followed him. I followed him about 10 miles into the woods, which was freaking wild to me. But I followed him in the pitch black in the middle of the night, and I was able to find his moonshine stash. I was able to observe him, and I watched him get some moonshine. Now he drank some, and then he made the 10-mile walk back home. But here the next day, the next morning, I wanted to go try some of that moonshine myself. So I woke up at the bright early dawn, and me and Ma was still asleep, and Pawpaw was up. He was up watching the news on his radio. So I told him I'd go outside and play. So I was running around in the fields a little bit trying to convince him that I was outside there playing. I wasn't up to no good. And I walked off into the woods, and there was a path that he had made himself from going there every night. So I just followed his path, uh, and I eventually found the moonshine distillery again, and he had a when I was there for watching him the night before, I saw him where he buried um, his moonshine, and I dug it out and pulled it out myself, and I had some. And it was so strong that it burned in my throat, and it made me cough a lot. And it was very strong. But little did I know, Pawpaw, he was watching me, and I turned around after drinking his moonshine. He's standing there, and he's going, "Boy, you know better than to come down here and drink more of my stuff." And that's when I saw Pawpawsaurus, and he was no longer Pawpaw, he was Pawpawsaurus. And he was very mad at me for drinking his moonshine, and It was so potent that that one sip that I had when I was 6 years old, I was drunk for like 6 days. Yeah, 6 days I was drunk off of Paw moonshine. It was so strong I pretty much turned into an anthropod. You know, man, it was a good time. I know Paw's up there in space with the aliens. He probably showed the aliens up in space how to make the moonshine. He's probably on Mars or Neptune making moonshine up in space, man. So yeah, if you, I'm gonna make that money, man. I'll make that money, and once I make enough money, I'm gonna go up to space and find Paw. Cause I know Paw's up in space making that moonshine with the aliens. I just know for a fact. But, but yeah, that was how I turned into an anthropod. But anyway, when Meemaw found out that I actually had some of the moonshine, she wasn't too pleased at Paw because he wasn't supposed to be drinking when I was around. So she actually, what happened was when Meemaw found out that I was drinking Paw moonshine, she didn't get mad at Paw. She got mad at me, and she made me go out into the barn, and she said you're gonna have to pick something for me to spank you with. And I was like, Meemaw, I don't want that Meemaw. And she was like, boy, you don't listen right now. I want to get y'all down there. I'm gonna beat you so silly you'll wake up with the buttocks all the way down in Arkansas. I was like, oh shit. So anyway, I went out to the barn. And I found a nice fishing pole. It was one of them fishing poles that was one piece. Like you couldn't collapse and take it apart. It was one of them fishing poles that was nice and long, and it was like wiggle, wiggle, make that wiggling noise. So I went into the cabin and I said, "Meemaw, I got the thing that you're gonna spank me with." And so she called Paw in. He comes stumbling in because it turned out he went back to the moonshine and he drank. He drank all the moonshine. He drank all of it because he didn't want Meemaw finding his stash. So he thought the most smartest thing was him to drink all the moonshine. So that's what he did, man. So he came stumbling in. Meemaw's about to beat me with the fishing pole, and you could smell the moonshine coming down the hall before he even entered the hallway. It stunk so bad. You would have thought that he just pulled over a DUI, and the man's name was Paulina. But nah, this was Pawpaw. Pawpaw was hammered off the moonshine. And he came in and he looks at me, Ma, and he's wobbling all over the place like this, and he says, Mima, there is only one specimen on this earth, and it is a frog crab. And it was so absurd that Mima forgot to beat me. And she ended up getting in an argument with Pawpaw about the environment and sexual dimorphism. So it was rather just an interesting time. My vacation was a rather long vacation down with Pawpaw and Mima. I remember when mom and dad came to pick me back up and take me back home down in the random experience. They picked me up, and I thought for sure that me and mom was gonna tell Paul and mom that I drank some of the moonshine, but they didn't tell him. Surprisingly, no. I think they kind of figured that I was gonna tell him since I was such a good innocent little kid, even though I had murdered 10 people by the time I was 2. But anyway, they come and pick me up, and I get in the car. It was a 1982 Volvo Chevy, and we get in there, and we had about a 12-hour drive all the way back down to Florida. So on the way down to Florida, my father turned to me and he said, "Boy, it's time for you to be a man." And I said, "Why, Dad? I'm only 10." And he said, "Boy, You don't question me, boy. And I was like, oh no. So he pulled over and he dropped me off at Paris Island. And I got snagged by a couple Marine drill instructors. And I was there for about a couple weeks. And then they realized that there was no point in trying to change me into a war machine. So what they did was they actually sent me to the Coast Guard. So they sent me to the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard saw me, and they were like, "Who? What the fuck is this piece of shit?" So that they ended up. What happened was they sent me to the Navy, and then the Navy didn't want me. They didn't say they didn't like how I was. They didn't like how they just didn't like me. So they sent me to the Army. The Army is where my life changed for the better in the Army. You see, when I was in the Army, I learned how to do things like run real fast and do a lot of push-ups. I did that a lot, and I did that for 3 years. By the time I got out, I was 13 years old. But I told everyone in the military that I was actually 18 years old, and I had a birth defect that made me look real young. So that worked for a little bit there. Anyway, once I got out of the Army, I wanted to do something else. I was still pretty mad at my father for dropping me off at the Marine Paris Island base. My dog just grew up, man. Gross. She didn't like throw up. She kind of just dry heave all over the place. No vomit or nothing. But anyway, when I got out of the Army, it was rather difficult for me to find any stability in my life because I was pretty angry at my dad for making me join the Marines and left me at Paris Island with no explanation on what the fuck was going on. So it was rather interesting. After a 1 year survey from January of 2009 to December of 2009, the surveys conducted determined whether or not I had a breeding cycle and whether or not I was actually a biological being or not. And this is why I think that Pawpaw was taken by the aliens because I had all these tests done to make sure that I was a biological human and what have you. So NASA came to my house by my time I was like 15, and they dragged me all the way down to Florida, down where their little launch pad is at, and they asked me a whole bunch of questions that I didn't know the answer to. So I got pretty annoyed at them. They're asking me questions like, "Who are you?" And I honestly at that point I didn't even know because I just didn't know anymore at this point. So they put me on the rocket, and I said, "Are you gonna send me to Paw?" And so they said, "Yeah, sure, man. We'll send you up to Paw." So they put me on the rocket with Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Tim Allen, Tom Hanks, and we took off pretty good, way up there, went up to space. But we didn't find Paw. Well, the interesting thing was they put me in this thing called an airlock, and they put me in that thing, and they said they'll be right back, and they closed the door behind me, and I was sitting there waiting patiently for them to come back, and then next thing you know, I'm launched out into space. But the cool thing was they weren't high enough, so when they launched me out into space out of the airlock, I got caught in the Earth's gravitational pull, and I was descended back down to Earth, and when I landed in a pool down in Philly, and I hit the pool so hard down in Philly that I actually flooded the whole city of Philadelphia. And it was completely buried in snow or water. So that is how I ended up becoming a meteorite.